Dustin said, look, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about Kansas City. We've got to go to the Bills locker room. We've got to go get the temperature on what that franchise feels like after the loss yesterday to Kansas City. So Dan Fetes joins us. Tremendous. At Dan Fetes on Twitter. ABC Rochester 13 Wham sports anchor and reporter. Dan, we're going to give you the platform. So you give us an idea of what the city of Buffalo is experiencing today.
It's Groundhog's Day, guys. That's what it's like right now in Buffalo. It just kind of feels like we've seen this before. I've been at these locker cleanouts before. For the second straight year, their season ends with a playoff loss at home. For the third straight year, their season ends in the divisional round. And for the third year out of the last four, it ends at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a tough pill to swallow. There's no getting around it. And going into the game last night, I felt very confident. I even was telling people in the press box before the game that I thought 24 points would be enough to beat this Chiefs team. But that was a classic Patrick Mahomes, New England Patriots, Tom Brady-like win. Just a gutsy win where we're in the locker room today, and I was talking to a couple players that I'm close with, and they were like, that's the best offense they've looked all year. One of them kind of jokes to me, goes, Marquez Valdez-Scantling hasn't caught any of those passes, and he catches two of them in man coverage. Like, it was one of those things where, like, even they couldn't believe it. Josh Allen talked about at the podium, this feeling and that it motivates him and all of these things. And then he kind of says, I feel like we should be practicing today. Like, this was a team that had won 6 games in a row and was playing their best football of the season heading into this game, that they didn't think that there'd be any shot of not practicing. But Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs continue to be this Bills team's kryptonite.
Dan, Sean McDermott in the regular season is 58-24, 0-5 now in the closeout games in the postseason. That's just the reality of it. Would they look to make a change possibly? What is the fan base thinking? What is the speculation in the media there?
Fan base and what we actually think will happen are two totally different things. Trust me, my DMs on X or Twitter are filled with Sean McDermott can't coach. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's lost that locker room one bit. Josh talked about some of the BS, as he put it, that he had to go through this season that he shouldn't have had to. Mitch Moore said he's so proud to be on a team that is led by a man like Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott has not lost that Bills locker room an ounce. A lot of this team always talks about what happened at 6-6. There was an article published, and the reports came out about his comments about 9/11 and all of these things. And everybody seemed to be jumping off the ship. And after that, the Bills had won, again, 6 in a row. I don't think there's any reason to move on from him. They've won the division. They've won the AFC East 4 years in a row. I get it. And, guys, my sports director, Mike Catalano, always brings it up. He's been covering the team for 30-plus years. He was there for all 4 Super Bowl runs. He talks about the difference between excuses and reasons. And I'm not trying to make excuses because I know Bills fans probably don't want to hear any of them or reasons. But last year, this team was gassed. Emotionally, the tank was empty after the DeMar Hamlin and everything that this team went through. This year, they won't say it. I talked to a player today, and he kind of smiled and just nodded. Injuries crushed this team at the end of the season. They were without their top 2 corners or 2 out of their top 3 corners. Christian Benford, they lost Trey White. They were without Terrell Bernard, who was a massive piece of their defense at middle linebacker. They were without Matt Milano, who is all-pro. They were banged up throughout the secondary. All of those things seemed to come to roost last night, and that was just the fact of it. Again, not making excuses, just saying reasons as to where it just feels like this team didn't have enough at full strength. And I get it. Hey, every team has injuries. You could talk to Browns fans. Their team had tons of injuries. But you're just looking around going, they had 2 backup linebackers. They pulled up A.J. Klein, who was on the couch a month ago, playing out there when he was limping around the locker room today. You had Terrell Dodson, who's another middle linebacker who's a special teamer. Those guys, the Chiefs attacked them. The Chiefs had 8 plays of 20-plus yards yesterday. The Bills had none. That's all you really need to know.
Dan Fetes, Groundhog's Day, he says. He covers, of course, Buffalo sports, including the Bills, joining us here, Sharp Money. One of those 20-plus yard plays could have been Diggs. The throw from Allen was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this way. I'm curious what the other Bills players had to say about Josh Allen's performance yesterday, because I feel like they owe him an apology. He was Superman. He was so awesome in the game. He was spectacular.
It was unbelievable. He's had a couple of those games, especially on this 6-game stretch, especially since Joe Brady has taken over as the interim play caller. You've just seen a more free Josh Allen. And this, again, Dawson Knox talked to him today. He said he hopes he gets to play the rest of his career with Josh Allen. He goes, I think every person in that locker room would say the same thing. He's bloodied, he's bruised, he's limping, and he goes, he's a modern-day gladiator. And I know there's a lot of talk about that. He didn't hit deep throws and all these things. You can't place the ball any better into Stefon Diggs' hands. He's got to make the catch. And they missed on a couple of plays like that. And look, every time it seemed like the Bills had a misstep yesterday, they seemed to catch a break. And Josh Allen was just one of those guys putting on the cape and carrying this offense because they need more playmakers around him. I know that sounds like an easy cop-out to say, but they were missing Gabe Davis, who I don't think a ton of in the offensive game as the number 2 wide receiver, but Khalil Shakir, their number 3 wide receiver, was banged up at some point. Diggs was all of a sudden a foot injury popped up. So there have been problems. But I agree. I don't think you can ask anything more of Josh Allen. And I know it's stupid that quarterbacks get all the blame for the losses and all the credit for the wins, but Josh Allen was phenomenal this postseason. He was great against the Steelers. He was great again. And again, tough conditions. Just putting the team on his back. When nothing seemed to come easy, Josh would just take off and make something happen out of nothing. 3rd down conversions, 4th down conversions. I'll say this again. For the second time in a row that he's played the Chiefs in the postseason, he's deserved better.
Dan, you mentioned Stefon Diggs. He's going to be 31 years old next year. He's still got another 4 years. There's an opt-out after next year. He has not had a 100-yard game since October 15th. At what point in time, is it on Diggs? Is it the system? What is the problem there with their number 1 receiver who, when he got there, looked like a number 1 and now has really fallen off that perch?
Yeah, he was great all the way through last year until about week 9, and he kind of seemed to hit this lull. The whole team did. The Ken Dorsey offense last year really kind of sputtered at the end of the season. They seemed to be okay. Diggs had a couple of big games early on in the season, and then it sputtered again. So are you sitting there going, well, it's second half slump. Obviously, Diggs is getting up there in age. I will say this. Diggs deserves better than his stat lines show. And I will say this, going back to the New England game, the Chargers game, he was beat. In the Steelers game, he got behind the defense, and Josh missed him on some throws. We can compliment Josh, and we don't have enough time on this interview to talk about how good Josh Allen is. But he's missed Diggs on a couple of deep throws. It just has happened. So, and again, he missed him for like a 75-yarder in the Chargers game or the New England game. And I said, we would all think about this differently if he connects on one of them. And all of a sudden we look at it and we say, instead of Diggs' stat line being 4 for 40, it's 5 for 110 and a touchdown. And we go, oh, this is all better. I think it's a little bit of an overreaction. Diggs is still a consummate leader. I'm on the sidelines. I'm filming the games. The dude is dialed in. This diva talk is blown out of proportion from people that aren't necessarily in Western New York on a day-in-and-day basis. The guy has been nothing but an amazing teammate, leader on the sidelines and in that locker room. He needs to step up. He is getting up there in age. The Bills need to find somebody that can also help alleviate some of the pressure. It was confusing because teams talked about, or, Josh and these guys, we all asked them about it, and they said, well, the way defenses are playing him. It's like, well, defense has always played Stefon Diggs a certain way. Like, it wasn't like they all of a sudden just found out who Stefon Diggs is. So they have to find more creative ways to get him the ball. Look, last night he took a handoff. They did an RPO with Diggs in the backfield. They're trying to get him involved more, but it just wasn't working towards the end of the season.
So, Dan, what changes for next year? It sounds like McDermott's going to stick around. Does Brady stay as the OC? And, what are the changes that need to be made?
Look, their offensive line was one of a rare offensive line that every single starter played, every single game. So their offensive line was great. I think they need to add more skill position players. I think this offense needs to become more explosive. We saw that at times, but it just wasn't there this season. Even yesterday against Kansas City, great defense. It is very tough to have 8 7-minute drives all the time that go 8, 9, 10 plays. It's just tough. You have such a small margin for error. They need to have more explosive plays. They talked about it. 0 plays of 20 yards. James Cook had drop issues. I think they need to find another explosive, dynamic skill player in the draft. And look, Brandon Beane deserves a lot of credit for being the guy that traded for Stefon Diggs, but he hasn't drafted a wide receiver earlier than the 4th round for Gabe Davis. Like, you need to put these guys on young rookie deals that can make plays for Josh Allen in the passing game. Josh Allen is your $250 million investment. You need to make sure that you are giving him all the tools that he needs to be successful. So I think they revamped the offense. He can piece together the defense. We know you're going to get Matt Milano back. Defensively, it's a huge boost. What happens with Trey White? He tore his Achilles back in week 3. All of those questions need to be answered. But to me, I'm reinvesting more and more money into Josh Allen and this Bills offense.
Okay, Dan. Groundhog's Day. That's a good way of putting it. It's going to be a long week in Western New York. Thank you for the time. I know it's a busy day. ABC Rochester, 13 Wham sports anchor, reporter. Good follow on Twitter at Dan Fetes. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys, for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.